I'm Cristina Fontanes Rodriguez, and I'm the Archival Collections Manager at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies.
My name is Lindsay Whitwer. I'm the Digital Archivist at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. What is an archive and why do they exist?
An archive is a lot of things. So an archive is a collection of things. It's also the organization or the department that handles and preserves and provides access to those materials. The archive is also the building. And I always like to throw in that archives is just a practice that frames historical analysis.
At our organization, it's personal papers, collections of people have donated, as well as organizational records.
What is an archivist and what do they do?
An archivist works primarily with preserving and making accessible primary source material. So like papers of people in their lives or organizations.
Acquiring them, preserving them, conserving them, and providing access to them as well.
We arrange and describe them and then help facilitate researchers getting access to them.
Sometimes we work in institutions, sometimes we work in museums and universities.
How do you become an archivist?
So the most straightforward path right now is to go to library school.
So within many library schools, there are archive-specific tracks that you can go into.
Although you can also sometimes study history and do an archives concentration that way.
I myself have a master's degree in both public history and archival management, and I don't have a library degree. So don't ask me to catalog books. I don't know how, but I know how to manage an archive.
Where do archivists work?
We typically work within archives, which is like the easiest answer to say. However, where are these archives located?
In a gallery,
historical museums,
private corporations,
different nonprofits,
fashion houses,
magazines.
So really, there's a lot of places where you could work as an archivist.
Internally, they need to have a strong sense of who they are, where they came from, and are collecting their collective history to both inform people who work there, also to provide resources that they might need in their day-to-day business. Our archive, CENTRO, is located within Hunter College and the CUNY system. So there's a lot of places where archives can live so that people can both do their day-to-day work and provide access to research. Why did you become an archivist?
I didn't know what an archives was when I started studying. I just knew that I thought that I wanted to be a librarian, so I went to library school because I just knew that I needed a master's to get a job as a librarian. But then I took a course in archives and kind of like found my nerd there. So decided to just like pursue that, did my first internship, and I've been working in archives since.
I actually started going into grad school to do public history because I really thought I'd want to work in a museum. I previously wanted to be a history professor because I just love learning and I love doing research and I love teaching. Everything I wanted out of a professorship is actually what you do in the archive. I get to learn about a variety of topics and I get to organize things, which I find amazing. So to be able to marry kind of the humanities side of history and, traditional archives with the digital side of working with computers has been a marriage made in heaven for me. You mentioned you work at CENTRO. What are the archives of the Puerto Rican Diaspora at CENTRO? The archives of the Puerto Rican Diaspora are the archival collections at CENTRO, and we collect primarily on Puerto Ricans in the diaspora. We tend to not collect on material that is island focused. Naturally, we have a lot of material on the island because people went back and forth and their families came from the island, they came from the island, but primarily we're focused on documenting the Puerto Rican experience in the diaspora. When was the archives at CENTRO founded? The CENTRO archives were founded in 1989. We had at CENTRO an oral history project in the early 80s called Puerto Ricans in New York, Voices of the Migration, that brought together many of the task forces that were present in the early years of CENTRO. From that project, in which they interviewed tons of pioneros, as well as just people who were part of the Great Migration, they received 2 archival collections. One, Jesús Colón, who was an activist, a labor organizer, a writer, and a great collector of his experiences, as well as Justo Martí, who is a Cuban photographer who documented, for example, all of the bodegas, as well as just life in this neighborhood. So between the 2 of those, we then had archival collections. So we founded an archive. We did a big assessment and determined where collections might be or the need for collecting, and recognized that CENTRO needed to have an archive. And the time was right in the 80s to start collecting on one. It was founded with those 2 collections, and then shortly after we would receive Pura Belpré's collection And a few years after that, we got the offices of the government of Puerto Rico in the United States.
What ethics must you follow as an archivist? How has this evolved over time? It has evolved in general in the archives field. Before, you were supposed to be a neutral entity. You were just supposed to be a caretaker or a keeper of the records. But now it's more evolved to the sense where we're not neutral entities and we have a responsibility to be not only caretakers, but there's a more of an understanding of how archives shape history. So we have a responsibility to fill in the gaps of what was left behind.
We can't appraise collections. We can't provide any monetary appraisal of material because we're just the custodians of it. A lot of times when people donate, they don't necessarily go through everything, or somebody's passed and you're just getting all their stuff. So part of the work is us going through and determining stuff that shouldn't be in the archive. Medical records, bills is not something that everybody should potentially have access to.
Why is it important to focus on archives that highlight the Puerto Rican diaspora? Well, first, because it has had long been an under-documented topic within archives. And of course, it spans many different areas. So it's not just a group of migrants or just a way to study migration, but also it has its tentacles in art history, in politics, in social justice issues. And when you are working within a diasporic community or any sort of marginalized community, you can't just apply regular archival practice to it, right? Because that doesn't necessarily apply to the archives of the Puerto Rican diaspora. So working within this, what seemingly is a very niche subject, allows us to create an archives that is transparent and authentic, and that is going to be really helpful for our community of researchers. What is your favorite part about your job? It's fun working with the things. Something that I don't do anymore at CENTRO is doing reference, but it used to be very fun because you can do a lot of investigation. It's very fulfilling to find a specific mention of someone in a letter, for example, or just to tie loose ends and just find information that no one has found before for someone else. And then you don't have to write a paper about it. You just send the information and that's it.
A lot of the work I do in the digital archives is really workflow intensive. We're using tons of programs. There's lots of steps in our processes, handoffs between systems. And I really love building very efficient workflows. When I started as a digital archivist, I worked in what was called a library innovation lab. And we really took that lab ethos seriously. And it's something I really carried to CENTRO and is really important to my practice as a digital archivist and as an archivist in general. How can we innovate? How can we take things from other fields or learn from other institutions? How can we make things more efficient, but also a very collaborative environment? So I work with my team. I want them to feel empowered to make changes. What do you wish people knew about your job?
We don't know every single piece of every single item that's in the collection. It's impossible. They're not books. A single collection could have thousands of items inside.
I think that there's a misnomer about being a librarian or an archivist that we kind of just sit around and read a lot. There's so much that goes into our work. As a broad concept, we're information professionals. So we're always trying to find, synthesize, organize information.
And I also wish that they would understand that it's our job to interpret the collection as a whole, but it's their job to do that as well. When we're doing programming, when we're doing description, we are interpreting a collection and we are putting in our own ideas into what this collection is, but that doesn't mean that we know every single thing that's in there.
We're also not trying to be gatekeepers. We're really access focused and we really want to democratize the process. I think that's why we have these different databases. You guys find what you want and we can help you along the way, but we don't want to be nope, only we know all about this. You have to come through us to find anything about the archival material, and then maybe we'll let you have access. They used to, at certain archives, make you bring a letter of recommendation. It's a really old school mentality. We want everybody who comes in to feel welcome and not scared to work with the material. And I think people really enjoy researching at CENTRO because of that. That is really an ethos of archivists in the 21st century. And we want to teach people about how to use it. That's a key part of our job beyond just arranging and describing and providing access. How many collections does CENTRO have? CENTRO has approximately 326 collections as of right now. We also have a number of artificial collections, which are collections that are not, a particular person's collection or a particular organization. They're kind of a conglomerate on a topic or theme.
What is your favorite item at the Centro archives?
So we have a number of short films from the Migration Division that were created to both help Puerto Ricans assimilate and get comfortable with moving stateside, as well as reflect on things going on and celebrating Puerto Rican culture on the island. We digitized a number of them a couple of years ago, and my favorite is Invierno in Nueva York because it literally shows Puerto Ricans how to exist in the winter in New York City.
Muchos de nosotros los puertorriqueños, a pesar de conocer el invierno, nos es difícil acostumbrarnos a usar suficiente ropa. Algo dentro de nosotros como que se resiste.
It's really sweet as well as incredibly informative, and I think people could really both connect to it as well as think it's kind of, it has some humor to it now looking back at it.
Who can view the archival collections at Centro?
Everybody.
Anybody who makes an appointment, and for digital collections, anybody that has an internet connection.
You don't have to be affiliated with CUNY or any university at all to come see our archives. We're the only CUNY library actually that is open to the whole community. Is there a digital repository for Centro's digital archives? Yes, we have a digital collections portal that's available through our website that contains all of the material we have digitized and some of our born digital material. That's great because it has metadata at the item level, so you can search across all the collections that we have represented there, which is about 177 of our 326 collections. You can search across by keyword, by people, and it's a really rich repository to get a sense of what we have in our collections. We typically use it as an entry point, and then you can kind of jump into the physical collections.
Why is it important to have our archives accessible to the public? Because there is no reason to have archives if they're not going to be accessible. Archives are for the people. There are records. We preserve them for everybody to be able to access. They're the reason why we exist. If we just sit there in our offices expecting people to come, then we're just not doing our jobs. It doesn't matter how well we try to describe something, the value of the collections that we acquire, or the relationships that we have with PhDs, right? If we're not really going into the community and making sure people know about us, then we're just not doing our jobs.
Where can I access Centro's digital archives?
Through our website.
You could go to our website at centropr.hunter.cuny.edu. The digital collections themselves, the address is centroca.hunter.cuny.edu.